Financial independence, retiring early. We all want to do it. That's why we are here. That's why we are saving and investing and preparing for the future. But what are the pros and the cons? And how in the world can there be cons to retiring early? Let's go ahead and break it down. So I've really split this thing into two, pros and cons. And I would say they are really quite even. So let's start with the positives and then talk about the negatives and how these two things even out, and most importantly, what you should do and how you should approach this, because I think most of us would want to get to that number as quickly as we can. Nobody wants to sit here and work a 9 to 5 for 30 or 40 years. We don't want to do that, okay? Especially if the job is boring. Now, if your job is fun and you enjoy it, that is a very good scenario to be in. I think most people, if you can find that Goldilocks place where you enjoy going into work, that is great. If that energizes you, whatever, if it's a sport, that would be awesome, right? Because you can get paid a lot. If that's teaching and that energizes you, that is the Goldilocks scenario, right? It's even better if that job pays a lot of money and you enjoy it and you can do it for as long as you want. But that's not everybody. Some people don't have great jobs. I've had some jobs that were trash. I've had some jobs that were good. And I've had some jobs that are right in the middle that were boring. And that is not the worst thing in the world. Okay, we can have that conversation later. But let's start with the pros. First thing is, if you are looking to retire early, but first let's take a step back. Let's take a step back real quick. Let's talk about what retirement is, okay? There are a lot of misconceptions around what that word means and how the whole thing works. I'm going to give you my definition of it and how it kind of works in finance. Basically, what retirement is for the layman, for the regular person, is you have invested and saved enough money where you can live off of it. You don't have to go to work anymore and you don't have to do a whole 9 to 5 thing. So you are either going from working 8 hours a day to maybe working 2, maybe 4, or you just work when you feel like it. Or you can say, hey, I don't need this job at all, and I'm going to live off of my investments until the end of time. That is what retirement is. To get to retirement, you have to save and invest to get there. That is what retirement is. All right? Now, retiring early for most people is doing so before the age of 65. Now, when we talk about FIRE, that is the Financial Independence Retire Early movement, which really started to kick off around the 2010s and got super popular, is people doing this in their 30s and 40s. Okay, so we're talking to people doing this before 65, people doing this 20 to 25 years early, which was wild at the time. There are tons of articles and people doing it. I've had friends who have done it, and it was fun, okay? It was fun to watch them do it. Clearly, I have not. Okay, and there are some reasons as to why. So what are the pros? Number one is control. You get to control who your boss is, where you want to be, when you want to be there. You can say, look, I don't feel like being here, I'ma leave. Okay, I don't need to be anywhere I feel like being or don't want to be. You have 100% control on what you do with yourself. And number two is time. When you have a job, right, and this is not necessarily the worst thing in the world per se, but when you have a job, you have a 9 to 5, you don't necessarily own your time. Your job owns your time. They compensate you for that, but from 9 to 5, from 10 to 4, whatever your work hours are, they own your time for that specific period, and that's it. If you are missing out on certain things, or you prefer to be on vacation, or you prefer to do other things, you can't really do that the way that you want to. And for most of us, not all, some people have, different hours, or, I was a teacher for a while, so my hours were very long at one point in time, and then we had the summers, and that time was mine. My sleep schedule was different when I was in the summertime, and it was very different when I was, coaching and teaching, and it was hard to sleep and do things. So everybody's hours are different, everybody's job is different. But I didn't really have control when the school year was going on. Every day was different, every day was hard, there's a lot of stuff going on. But retiring early, I say, look, I'm 30, I'm 35, I'm 40, I get to do what I want to do. I can go where I want to go when I want to go there. And also, in terms of time, I don't know how much time I got left, right? And that's not to be morbid, but if I get to retire early and things are normal and I get to, live to a normal lifespan of 70, 80, whatever the lifespan is for people, right? Well, I get more of that time to myself. And I think that is also important. That's why so many people want to enjoy it, because there were so many people, especially for previous generations, who saved and invested and did all that stuff. You retire at 65 and then you turn around and die at 70. That's not great. You only have 5 years. You worked for 50 something years, or let's say 40 something years, because you had to be 20s, right, in your 20s, but you worked for 40 something years and you only got 5 to live free. And by the time you did that, your knees was hurting, you couldn't really run around, you couldn't fly on a plane because it was too much on your body and all that kind of stuff. And that's not freedom, is it? That's not really fair. That work stole your prime years away from you. And that is one of the reasons. There's a lot more into it. That's one of the reasons as to why people shifted so much into trying to break the system and save and invest aggressively to hit their financial numbers as fast as they could, especially after the Great Recession, where a whole lot of other things broke. And we can get into that conversation. I'd love to. So you have to let me know in the comments, because we can really go deep into that part of it. But this does not come without a negative side to it, a flip of the coin, if you will, because when you talk about finances, when you talk about economics, we say that there is no free lunch, right? There's the whole physics, equal and opposite reaction type thing. You can't just come up with something without there being some equal and opposite reaction. When you save aggressively, when you are doing something to make hay, if you will, on the front end, there's also going to be some back end consequences. So what are some of the cons? And you have to weigh where it is you want to be. So there is the risk of inflation, right? So that's just something just across the board. So the more that you are aggressive now and saving more and investing more now, inflation is going to be a bigger risk, because now I have to worry about inflation in my 20s and 30s and 40s today versus worrying about it, for a shorter period of time. We also call this, and you can lump these two things in if you want, we also call this longevity risk. That is living, I don't say it this way, but living too long. Meaning, I have to make sure that instead of my money lasting, let's say 15 years, now it has to last me from age 40 to age 80. That is a very long financial plan for me not to work and just for the money just to coast for 40 years in a row and not run out. Whereas most financial plans and most financial planners were really built for a sprint and for the money to last just 15 years. And that was about it. Now, thankfully, there are ways to get around it, and there are middle grounds for us to kind of figure it out in the midterm and figure out how to make this entire thing work. And that's where we come in. That's where this channel comes in, and that's where we kind of figure out the solutions to this. But the longevity risk is a problem, and you will see too where there have been some wrinkles, right? We have seen prominent influencers, prominent business people bloggers and everything in between, who before the pandemic, before they had kids, before they even had health issues, say, hey, look, I'm leaving. I'm going to do this financial freedom thing. I'm going to do this retire early thing. Then they had a kid or two and said, ooh, college is expensive. I'm going back to work. And then went back to work for a year, 2 years to save back up, and then go back and do whatever it was that they were doing. But that is a thing. When you retire early, very early, that longevity risk is a thing that you are going to have to plan for. Inflation is a thing you're going to have to plan for. Recessions are a bigger concern because since you're not working, you have no true way to replace that income. Right now, there's a recession with the new president or whatever. I'm not overly concerned about that. But if I'm in retirement now or very close to it, that is a much bigger concern. Now, stretched it out over 40 years is a very, very, very big concern because I have no way to really replace that income unless I have a plan. So, how do we do both of these? Because we know we don't want to run into longevity risk. We don't just have a dangling plan for 40 years and just have the money out there. But we also don't want to just sit around and have no option and just be stuck on a treadmill, stuck in the rat race, if you will, for 30 years or 40 years or however long. How do we meet in the middle. How can we have some flexibility, if you will? Here's how. All right, here's how. Number one, you want to be as aggressive as you can. Okay, some of it is very simple, very boring, but it's going to help you get there. Okay, so you want to be as aggressive as you can. Now, most people would still suggest anywhere between 12 to 15% of your income should be invested. If that's in a 401k, if you got it, if you got a match, go for those things. If you can do more, go ahead and do more. Whatever you can invest that you can afford within your budget, absolutely go for those things. What you can invest now is absolutely going to help you in the future. That's number one. Number two, the goal here, one of the goals is if you can put enough up now, you can also perhaps move into retirement and just reduce your income significantly and or reduce your expenses. For example, there are plenty of people who are in that early retirement phase and they say, look, I might not, let's say if I'm making, for example, just to make the math easy, I am making $100,000 now. However, I can actually live off of a $40,000 income. Now, that's not everybody's situation. Okay, that's not everybody's situation, but I'm just making a dramatic example just for you to understand. So they're saying maybe they're an attorney, maybe they're doing whatever, but they can, instead of working 40 hours a week, they can go somewhere else. Maybe they're teaching on the weekends or teaching 3 days a week or something at a college, okay? And they don't have to work as much and they can just do something that's easy, something that fulfills them a lot more. They get paid less, but between their investments and that lower paying job, they can stretch out their investments for a much longer period of time. Something like that is how some people are getting by. Perhaps it is starting that side hustle or that business they've always wanted to, and that is supplementing their income and stretching things out a bit more too. But you have to be a little bit more creative on how to do those two things. The other thing too is finding ways to, I want to say severely decrease your expenses because that feels a little too dramatic, but finding ways to really decrease those expenses. Obviously paying off your debt is something I think is too obvious for us to discuss, but that is something. But some people are extreme and say, look, I'm going to go the tiny house route. You can go that far if you want. I'm a little too big for a tiny house. But also people who are house hacking, meaning sharing a house, dividing expenses that way. Some people are staying with their parents a lot longer to save up for a home or even retire early that way. Whatever it is you got to do, if that is something you are absolutely hell-bent on. Other people too are saying, look, I don't need to necessarily rush. I'm just going to be very aggressive and save 20, 25% and be done by 50. That is also something that can work for you. The main thing is this: have your race and do what you are trying to do. You don't necessarily have to set a bar based on what you see on Instagram, set a bar based on what you see other people do. Set your bar and stick to what it is that you want to do yourself, and then find the pieces that work best for you. Personally, I'm being patient. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm being patient for a lot of personal reasons, for a lot of health reasons. I need health insurance. Let me be honest with you. Look, kids might need braces one day. Okay, I don't know if y'all saw the video about my kid who lost his two front teeth for whatever reason. Yes, it's a tangent, but it is important. For whatever reason, he expects that the tooth fairy is going to give him $200 per tooth. I don't know where he got this expectation from, but as a dad, right, if I were to be super aggressive and retire today, do I really want to be out there with no insurance and just come out of full pocket for what could be braces one day, college and all that stuff with no support or backup? Personally, no. Not with two kids. That's not me. Now, once the kids are out the house and they are where they want to be, then I can adjust the plan and kind of shift things up just a bit. But everybody's not me. Everybody is not in my position. So that's why you have to figure out what is going to be with your race and how you want to put the puzzle pieces wherever they are going to be for you. If I were different, right, my family situation were different, then my entire portfolio would be different in terms of how things would be arranged. So that's why it's extremely important to keep personal finance personal, but realize that your building blocks and what tools and toys that you play with to get there can absolutely look different, but you can get there. It's all determinant on how much you put in and what tools you use to increase your income, decrease your expenses, how much you are investing, and then at what time or date you decide to walk away. That is important too. The sooner you want to walk away, and let's say 5 years from now you want to put up a lot, right? If it's going to be 20 years from now, then you may not have to put in as much. All of that stuff is going to matter. And the more that you say, look, I don't need 100% of my income, I only need 50 or 35% of my income, that's going to stretch out those numbers as well. So there are a lot of things that you can absolutely play with to retire early and reduce the longevity risk, to reduce the inflation risk, and reduce a lot of the issues that can come with the retiring early problem. Because the main thing, you want to have that time. You want to have that freedom. You want to travel the world and do all the fun things. But I'm gonna leave you with this. And I think this is perhaps the most important piece when it comes to financial freedom in general. I'm gonna talk about this next in my next book, and that's the hint. Okay, I'm hinting toward it. Okay, but I believe in having what I call wealth sprints. Okay, and that is having, think of it like an island, right? We all want to have this crazy, like I want to go to the Olympics one day. Now, I know it's going to be in LA at some point. I may or may not make that one. I don't know. But what I would do is, take smaller trips as I'm continuously saving for the larger one, right? So, maybe a better example, because the Olympics comes every 4 years, that's a little more difficult. Let's say Disney World is taking all my kids. I got two. I'm saying all, like I got a bunch, but it feels like, because Disney is so expensive nowadays. But let's say that I want to take both my kids to Disney World in 5 years. Okay, that is the main goal. That's like my retirement goal or something like that. That's the main goal. That's where we want to go. But a wealth sprint could be, in the meantime, I want to make sure that we can do a weekend trip or something to Six Flags. What that does is it allows me to hit these little milestones along the way. It helps me to get motivated, it helps the kids to get motivated, and it doesn't set me too far back in my budget where I never get to the main thing. And what that does is, once I do it, I'm more motivated to hit the next milestone. And again, it pushes me forward to continue to go, and says, oh look, this is fun, I want to do more of this. Oh look, this is, now I'm halfway there, let's take another quick weekend trip. And then, you guys like this, we all like this, let's get on the same page, because the next time is the big one, right? That's going to be the Disney trip and things like that. So I'm going to elaborate more on that in my next book. We're going to talk more about that here pretty soon. But in the meantime, let's shout out those who are in the members only. If you want to see your name here, then you should join our members only. You get early access to videos like this and more. If you just join, then your name will be on the videos for next week. And it's going to be an interesting week coming up. Also, don't forget about my free class on how you can create your first six-figure investing plan, which draws a lot on what we have been talking about today. Also, if you want to know more about investing and how you can get started, you want to check out these videos right here.